Listening Library presents Whole of My Life by Jack Gantos. Hi, I'm Jack Gantos. I have learned this. It is not what one does that is wrong, but what one becomes as a consequence of it. Oscar Wilde. Part 1, Chapter 1. Look straight ahead. The prisoner in the photograph is me. The ID number is mine. The photo was taken in 1972 at the Medium Security Federal Correctional Institution in Ashland, Kentucky. I was 21 years old and had been locked up for a year already, the bleakest year of my life, and I had more time ahead of me. At the time this picture was taken, I weighed 125 pounds. When I look at my face in the photo, I see nothing but the pocked mask I was hiding behind. I parted my hair down the middle and grew a mustache in order to look older and tougher, and with the greasy prison diet, salted chicken gizzards in a larded gravy, chicken wings with oily cheese sauce, deep-fried chicken necks, and the stress and the troubled dreams of capture and release, there was no controlling the acne. I was overmatched. I might have been slight, but I was smart and cagey. I managed to avoid a lot of trouble because I knew how to blend in and generally sift through the days unnoticed by men who spent the majority of their time looking to inflict pain on others. I called these men skulls, and they were freaks for violence. Here we were, all of us living in constant, pissy misery, and instead of trying to feel more human, more free and unchained in their hearts by simply respecting one another and getting along, many of the men found cruel and menacing ways to make each day a walk through a tunnel of fear for others. Fear of being a target of irrational violence haunted me day and night. The constant tempo of that violence pulsed throughout my body and made me feel small and weak and cowardly. But no matter how big you were, there was no preventing the brutality. I had seen the results of violence so often, with guys hauling off and smashing someone's face with their fists or with a metal tool, a baseball bat, a rock, and all for no other reason than some imagined offense or to establish a reputation for savagery. When I lived and worked in the prison hospital, especially after I had become the X-ray technician, I was part of an emergency medical response team. I was called on day and night to X-ray all types of ugly wounds to see if the bones behind the bruised or bleeding flesh had been cracked, chipped, or broken. As we examined them, the patients would be telling the guards, I didn't even know the guy, or my greatest fear, I never heard him, never saw him. It was this lottery of violence that haunted me. Your number could come up anywhere, any time, in the dark of night while you slept in a dormitory with 100 other men, or in full daylight on the exercise field while you strolled in the sun. Once, in the cafeteria line, standing directly next to a guard, I watched a skinny black kid stab some other blood with a dinner fork. He drove it into the guy's collarbone so deep the doctor had to remove it with a pair of surgical pliers. AIDS wasn't a factor then. The blood that sprayed over the food trays was wiped off by the line workers, and they kept spooning up our chow. I wasn't raised around this level of violence. I wasn't prepared for it, and I've never forgotten it. Even now, when walking some of Boston's meaner streets, I find myself moving like a knife, carving my way around people, cutting myself out of their picture and leaving nothing of myself behind but a hole. Like most kids, I was aware that the world was filled with dangerous people, yet I wasn't certain I could always spot them coming. My dad, however, was a dead-eye when it came to spotting the outlaw class. He had never been in prison, but he always seemed to know who had spent time in the big house, or who was headed down that path. In his own way, he tried to warn me about going in their direction. When I was young, he would drive the family from Florida back to our hometown in western Pennsylvania to visit relatives. Once there, he'd troll the streets with me in our big Buick and point to guys he knew and tell me something wicked or weird or secret about them. He killed a man with a pitchfork, Dad would say, nodding slyly toward some hulking farmer in bib overalls. Look at his hands. He's a strong SOB. Could strangle the life out of a cow. Or Dad would point to a woman. She had a kid when she was in 9th grade and sold it to a neighbor. He knew it all. He burned down a barn. He shot a cop. He robbed a bank. Dad went on and on. I was always surprised at how many people from such a small town had been in prison, and I was really surprised that after committing such despicable acts, they were back out on the street. They were a scary-looking lot, misshapen, studded with warts and moles, and I was glad we were in the car. But not for long. He'd take me to the Elks Club, or the Ambets Hall, or Heckler Gun Club, in order to get up close and personal with some of the criminal class. He'd order a beer and get me a Coke and some sort of food treat that came out of a gallon pickle jar of beet red vinegar, a hard-boiled egg, or a swatch of pigskin, or a hunk of kielbasa. Everything smelled like a biology specimen, and with the first bite, the red juice spurted out and ran down my chin. I must have looked like I'd split my lip in a bar brawl. Then, once we were settled, Dad would continue to point out the criminals, all the while using his Irish whisper, which could be heard in the next town over. He pointed out bank robbers, church robbers, car thieves, and a shadowy second-floor man known for snatching jewelry from the bedrooms of sleeping homeowners. I began to imagine the entire town was some sort of bizarre experimental prison camp without walls, a punishment center where criminals were sentenced to living only with other criminals. Dad snapped his fingers. These folks zigged when the rest of the world zagged, and once you cross that line, there's no coming back. Mark my words. All this was my father's way of letting me know he was in the know. He had the dirt on everyone, and it was the dirt that made them interesting. At the same time, he made it clear they were damaged goods and could never come clean again. Dad's keen eye for spotting criminals of all stripes was impressive. But it wasn't perfect. He never had me pegged for being one of them. Ironically, in spite of all the fear and remorse and self-loathing, being locked up in prison is where I fully realized I had to change my life for the better, and in one significant way, I did. It is where I went from thinking about becoming a writer to writing. I began to write stories, secret stories about myself and the restless men around me. While among them, I may have feigned disinterest, but like my father, I watched them closely and listened whenever they spoke. Then back in my cell, I would sit on the edge of my bunk with my journal spread open across my knees and try to capture their stories with my own words. For some paranoid reason, the warden would not allow us to keep journals. He probably didn't want the level of violence and sex among both prisoners and guards to be documented. My secret journal was an old hardback copy of The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, in which I spent hours writing in a tiny script between the tightly printed lines. I kept the book like a Gideon's Bible on top of my locker, and, as far as I know, its true purpose was never discovered. Someone once said, anyone can be great under rosy circumstances, but the true test of character is measured by how well a person makes decisions during difficult times. I certainly believe this to be true. I made a lot of mistakes and went to jail, but I wasn't on the road to ruin like everybody said. While I was locked up, I pulled myself together and made some good decisions. Like any book about mistakes and redemption, Oscar Wilde's De Profundis is my favorite. The mistakes are far more interesting to read about and write about. So I'll start with where I think I went around the bend. Chapter 2. Misfit. I was 19, still stuck in high school, and I wasn't living at home. I had unlimited freedom, no supervision whatsoever. I had spending money, I had a fast car, I had a fake ID. My entire year was a grand balancing act between doing what I wanted and doing what I should, and being who I was while inventing who I wanted to be, a writer with something important to say. During my junior year, my parents had moved the family from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to San Juan, Puerto Rico. My dad, who had a lifelong habit of switching jobs almost every year, took a position as a construction superintendent, rebuilding a beachfront hotel and casino. My mom and my older sister were all for it. My younger brothers were ready to live like surfer boys. It sounded like a big party to me. I turned in my books, packed my bags, and said farewell to my few friends and teachers at Sunrise High School without shedding a tear. Since I had already gone to 9 different schools, I was skilled at being a professional acquaintance.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?